Hey there, thanks for tuning into DuckBricks. I'm Chris, and the Ninjago Summer 2025 reviews are continuing. We're going to take a look at the second LEGO Ninjago Legends Monstrosity set, this being the Fire Knight Mech. It's a really interesting mech because it combines some of the articulation we have seen in Cole's Titan mech, but fuses it with a full-on display base and podium, showcasing the Fire Knight Mech fighting off against one of the beasts from the realm of monsters. It's a really interesting look at a brand new direction for Ninjago that is more skewing towards an older audience, and I really love this set. So let's jump into the Fire Knight Mech right now. Okay, here is set number 71846, the Fire Knight Mech. It is one of two Ninjago Legends sets, a brand new sub-theme of Ninjago geared towards older kids or young adults. It retails for $120 or 120 euros and comes with 996 pieces. The Fire Knight Mech itself, plus a display stand battling one of the monsters from the realm of monsters, and even a civilian for Kai to defend in his mech. It's a really interesting set, and it's one of the Ninjago Legends sets that blends both play and display. It certainly is the most display-oriented mech we've ever seen, but you can still remove it from the stand and fully articulate it, with almost as much articulation as we've seen from stuff like Cole's Titan mech. So this was absolutely on the top of my list of some of the most anticipated sets of this entire year. It's the very first Ninjago mech to have a fabric cape, and even beyond that, there's an extra posing rod which you can attach to the back of the cape to make it look like it's billowing in the wind. A really interesting design. And altogether, it's a very unique design that we haven't really seen for Kai yet, focusing more on dark red and muted colors and bringing in black into the color scheme, as opposed to the normal very bright reds that he typically has. Of course, that is all set to fit the tone of the brand new Ninjago Monstrosity series of shorts, which I'm very excited to be coming out very soon, and I'm really curious to see what this mech looks like in action from those shorts, but of course, we're judging the set itself. Immediately you can see the articulation of the mech, and we'll be taking a look at the articulation in all of the different points when we actually remove it from the stand, but I do want to spend some time with the mech on the display stand first, just showcasing how versatile it is as a LEGO build. The display base is rounded, which is similar to the same one we got in the Guardian Dragon, the other legend set of this wave, and I like how the scene itself is incredibly dynamic. You've got a monster emerging from the waves, a civilian boat being knocked aside, the mech ready to impale the monster with the great big weapon it has, and even one of the tentacles reaching up to wrap around the mech, but the mech's other hand grabbing that tentacle, fighting with it. It feels super dynamic as a scene, and it really does feel like a motion battle come to life, which is super unique and not something we've really ever seen from a Ninjago set before. That's the beauty of these Ninjago Legend sets. This one in particular acts just as good as a playset as it does for display because it does really look like an action scene frozen in place. I love the recolored dragon jaws in pink to make up the jaw of the beast. It almost looks like an octopus style of beak that it has there with a tentacle out of the mouth. There's a printed element being used for the 3 eyes on the creature itself on each side, and then of course you can move around each of the individual tentacles which are mounted on mixel joints or mini ball joints to really just get it in the perfect poses. Although honestly, you can kind of just leave it as is, just as the way you build it, and it looks very good in that sense. I like how everything is very intentional about the build. You have the tentacle wrapping up the longest one, just long enough to be gripped by the arm as the mech is fighting back. You've got the beak or the open mouth and jaw of the creature just as it's getting ready to be impaled by the massive weapon the mech is wielding. And then you have the boat which is toppling over, but one of the tentacles is actually going for the boat as well and curving around it. Even the water itself looks like it's filled with some sort of unique monsters or elements. You've got all these different splashes, the dark murky water, and then some glowing bits and pieces splashing out of the water, suggesting that there may be other creatures lurking within. It's really accomplishing a lot for such a small display base. Removing the mech from the display base, we can take a closer look at what that actually connection point wise looks like. It's just a couple of Technic pins, so it's a very simple setup, but it just is one that works really well. Setting the mech aside though, this is the main focus of the set, and I absolutely love this build. Is it as good as Cole's Titan Mech is the big question, and honestly, I don't really think it's fair to compare the two. Cole's Titan Mech was a gigantic mech made to push the boundaries of what it was like to build a giant Ninjago mech and max out the articulation. This has similar amounts of articulation, but it's meant to be much smaller, and we'll actually do a direct comparison with Cole's Titan Mech near the end of this video, showing them side by side if you're curious to see that. But first, I want to highlight the articulation of this mech. You can move the arms up and down and side to side. It is utilizing the relatively newer style of joint. You can also rotate the elbows rotationally like so, and then the hands themselves are mounted on ball joints. The entire waist is mounted at an angle and does ratchet on a ratchet click joint on the center of the waist, so you can spin that around. Of course, the skirt for the cloth can be moved around as well, and for the legs, you can actually bend the knees, yes, back and forth just on ball joints, which is really nice. It's not using the same knee sliding technique that we got in the Titan mech, but it doesn't really need to. It's not that big of a mech that it necessitates that. Even the feet themselves are mounted utilizing the BIONICLE 2006 Titan piston joint, which is really cool. And you do also get lateral motion for the leg itself to allow you to actually splay the legs out as you're moving it back and forth, which is something we've been missing from Ninjago mechs for years, and we literally just saw for the first time in Cole's Titan mech last year. Of course, you can pose it up in all sorts of different arrangements, and I personally had a lot of fun getting this into different poses. One where it's kind of lunging forwards with the weapon. Of course, you can just get it in a standard default pose as well, but there's just a lot of different things you can do with it. And if you're curious, this is what the cape looks like from the back, and we'll be taking a look at the cape without this extra attachment that kind of causes it to fold to the side, so definitely stay tuned if you do want to see the full cape itself. I'm going to try to get it into a standard pose here to just really showcase what you can do in kind of a default sort of pose. You've got the legs just perfectly straight where they should be, just a standard pose right there. You've got the weapon just splayed outwards, and that's what this would look like here. It's a really interesting design, and I love how dynamic it still feels even in this position, thanks to the extra piece to allow the cape to look like it's blowing in the wind. It's a very unique design and not something we've ever seen before from really any LEGO buildable action figure. BIONICLE, Exoforce, Knights, or otherwise, this is super unique. That being said, the build isn't perfect. When you're moving around the chest, it's actually really easy to just knock the cockpit off, and that is one of the major cons about this set. It is really easy to just accidentally bump that piece off. It's also just a little bit more fragile in some ways than previous mechs, like the fingers tend to fall off really easily as well because there's no studs in the side connection keeping them together, and it just feels like there are little things about the mech that could have been cleaned up that would have made it perfect with just a few minor adjustments. But the good thing is, it is LEGO after all, so you can make those adjustments if you want. It's also a little bit awkward the way the cape is mounted. It's not super clear if those older style of window panels that go around the cockpit are meant to go underneath the cape like you can see right now or above the cape. It isn't really that obvious how that's supposed to go, and the cape itself is very finicky to get into poses. It's certainly the kind of mech that you have to spend a lot of time and energy moving around to make it look good in a pose. But when you make it look good, it really looks good. Like right here, you can actually get it bent down on one knee, which I think is a very cool pose. You can even have it do some sort of a superhero landing like so, which I think is really cool. I couldn't really quite get it to have the fist on the ground in a standard superhero landing without it looking really awkward, but I think as it is right now, that is a very cool pose. And then of course, you can kind of have it saying, "Come here," getting into a battle stance, having the weapon be ready to attack, and all of that is accomplished by the lateral movement for the upper parts of the legs. I think that is actually a really underrated part of mech posing that we haven't really seen that often from other LEGO mechs that really hold them back from being as posable as they could be. So this is really nice. They did even manage to include that level of articulation, especially in a set like this, which isn't nearly as big or complex as something like the Cole's Titan mech. They still were able to pull it off. Taking a look at the rest of the joints here, of course you do have those BIONICLE 2006 piston joints. Look what they need to do to mimic a fraction of BIONICLE 2006's power. But listen, I get it. You're not using prefab leg pieces here. Every single piece here is brick built, so it's gonna be a lot more difficult to make it stable as opposed to some of those other BIONICLE sets we used to get. One thing I do want to talk about that I haven't really touched on so far is aesthetics. I've been talking so much about the functionality, I do want to step back and talk about the color scheme a bit. bit, because I love the color blocking of this set. The dark red looks really, really good, and I like how the bright red is used very sparingly, almost like the Under Armor, like the armor gets darker as it goes out. Once again, just like the Guardian Dragon, it's using a very tasteful amount of gold. It's not too much that it's overwhelming, and with the extra bar removed, here's what that cape looks like on the back, and that looks so cool. I am a sucker for mechs or robots that wear cloaks, and this is absolutely one that works so well. I love the hexagon-like design, showcasing that maybe it's some sort of a technological weave, and yet it also feels ancient with the symbol on the back. It feels like a really cool blend of old and new, and that's one of my favorite parts about the set itself. Of course, you could get it into all sorts of great poses with the cape sort of just hanging in its normal position, and honestly, I almost like it even better without the extra bar. I think the bar really works when you actually want it in a dynamic pose, just like this one right here, where it's blowing in the wind, arms are out, it's ready for battle, but for just a standard action pose, I think it looks totally fine just not having the cape have that bar attached. And the good thing is, you can do whatever you want with it. They even include extra holes that are unused on the bottom of the cape in case you want to use it for something else, like a sail for a boat at some point in a future mock, which I'm sure some people are going to immediately do as soon as they get their hands on this. Altogether, this is a remarkably posable vehicle. It is definitely one of the most aesthetically cool mechs we have gotten from Ninjago so far, in my opinion. I love the usage of the new element they introduced for Dragon's Rising Season 3 Part 2 for this wave as well, for a plume on the top of the head that almost looks like a trail of fire or smoke billowing out at the top of the head as well. It's really well done, and even small details like the dangling lantern that slowly sways back and forth every time you move it on a very short chain just very much work towards its favor, and you can get this in such cool poses. Honestly, this may be one of my favorite Ninjago mechs of all time. But the mech is only part of the set, and I do also want to spend some time taking a look at the base, because the display base itself is genuinely a pretty cool build too. You have some water elements, you have a bit of a fortress or some sort of broken apart rockwork. I like that it's mounted at an angle, again, making it feel much more dynamic than just a standard base, and while the base is not necessarily as detailed or as beautiful looking as the Guardian Dragon's base, it is very dynamic in the way it's set up. You've got the monster emerging from the water, you've got the boat being tipped over, you even have a clip on the back of the minifigure to show the hat falling off of his head. Everything about this is incredibly dynamic. But now, I want to do a quick comparison between two of my favorite Ninjago mechs now, Cole's Titan Mech and Kai's Fire Knight Mech. Obviously, the difference in scale is extreme. Cole's Titan Mech is a lot bigger than the Kai Fire Knight Mech, and that honestly makes a lot of sense to me. It totally should be a lot bigger as a Titan Mech, and one day I hope we do get a full-on Kai's Titan Mech, because we haven't gotten that yet. I'm sure we're gonna get it as like a big flagship set for one of the final years of Dragon's Rising. Heck, we might even get it next year for all I know. But for now, this is a really good alternative because it has about as much articulation, and you can even swap the weapons back from one to the other because the hand design is almost the same. The one thing I will say is Cole's Titan Mech is a little bit better because the hands and fingers are just tightened up a lot better for Cole's Titan Mech. They've got a studs in the side bracket which keeps the fingers in place, which unfortunately is not present for the Fire Knight Mech, which is why, as I mentioned, the fingers fall off a lot more easily. That being said, it is really cool to be able to have each mech wield each other's weapons. I think it genuinely is a really good pair to compare the two, and you can just see the size differences there, even though the amount of articulation is about the same. But now let's get this back on the stand. So to get this back on the stand, basically what you have to do is you actually kind of have to remove the weapon pieces and reverse it to allow you to be moving the weapon down. It's just a very simple change, but it just makes it look a lot better when you have that stickered part on the outside of the weapon be facing the main view of the angle, and then you move one of the legs up, straighten up the other one, and get it into a pose that looks good on the base. The base itself is actually really dynamic. There's a lot of poses you can accomplish with this mech on the base, and honestly, it wiggles back and forth a lot. You can choose your movement, which is good, I think, but it also means that you can very easily get it in a very awkward pose that you don't want it to be in, or a pose that just doesn't look good. I've seen people online who have already taken a look and built this, who have gotten it in all sorts of different poses, so you can accomplish a lot of different things with just this base, but for me, I think the best pose is how it appears on on the box art. So you kind of have it angled upwards a little bit, splay the leg out. Again, you can see I'm getting a lot of play here in terms of being able to move the item around and move the mech in all sorts of different positions. And then, of course, you get it so one hand is grasping the tentacle like it's fighting back against the tentacle monster. Then you have the other hand with the spear that's using to eventually destroy the monster once and for all, send it to the departed lands, or I guess the spectral lands now. And it's just really cool. Again, pretty quick to get it back on the stand, but if you want it to look really good, you definitely do want to play around with the details a little bit. One thing I wanted to mention about the details is I love the way the kneecaps are done. The triple spiked prongs atop the knees to really make it look like it's wearing boots just looks really, really cool. And altogether, the aesthetics for this model are so good. It is generally one of the best looking Ninjago models that we have ever gotten, and I'm a big fan of this one. So, all that to say is I'm actually a really big fan of this Legend set. Dare I say I actually like it a bit better than the Guardian Dragon. And don't get me wrong, I love the Guardian Dragon for what it is, but it is purely a display piece, and I don't mind that, but I just love how you can use this as both a display and a play piece. As I said so many times throughout this review, you can remove the mech and just play around with it. It acts like a normal Ninjago mech, but you can also just leave it on display and it looks probably better than any of your other mechs on display just because of the way it's built. It's just really well done as a set overall, and massive kudos to the designers for pulling this off. The only thing is the price of $120 does feel a little steep for what you get. Again, the mech is not that large. You saw the comparison with Cole's Titan mech, which was actually cheaper than this, and Cole's Titan mech is a good torso taller than this one. That being said, yes, that was an anomaly. Like, that set was oddly well priced. I don't think we're ever going to set price that well, so I don't think it's very fair. But I will say, the base itself is nice, but doesn't add a ton of pieces to the set, and I definitely feel like I would have preferred this set to basically be just $100 instead of $120. I think it would have been just a lot more easier for me to recommend this amazing set at $100 at full price, as opposed to $120, where I would say it's okay value, but not that great. So it definitely is up to your own judgment. The set does come with an exclusive poster, which is pretty nice. It's not that big of a poster. It's basically the size of like a printer paper. So honestly, I kind of was expecting a little bit more when they said poster. In previous LEGO sets, they've done some really big posters from like Pirates of the Caribbean and stuff like that back in 2011. But no, this one was just a piece of paper, but the artwork does look really nice. And I hope that they release that artwork digitally sometime. Moving onwards to the final part of the review, I do want to take some time to look at the minifigures, starting off with Kai here, who funnily enough is just marketed as Master of Fire in this set. We do know that this mech will be piloted by a previous Elemental Master of Fire in Ninjago Monstrosity, but this is obviously Kai, so I don't really know why they marketed him as Master of Fire. But altogether, it's a really beautiful minifigure. I love the dark red color scheme. The dragon, Source Dragon emblem on the back is really nice, and it's cool to get a recolor of the reveal blade in gold and gunmetal gray. The torso itself is really unique. It kind of feels like a special variation of the Kai minifigure, sort of like how we got a Mech Cole, and that was completely different than other versions of the character we've gotten, but this one feels very traditional. I could even see it being used on like a Sensei Kai style of figure. The only thing that really throws me off here is the usage of the hairpiece with bandana, to be honest. I think if the bandana was maybe dark red or even black, if they recolored that hairpiece, it would have been a lot better, but as it is right now, the bright red just kind of stands out from the rest of the suit being predominantly a darker shade. But I still do like the minifigure overall. Moving on to the civilian, this is pretty much just utilizing pieces that we have seen across a ton of different sets before, so it's not really using anything new. I do kind of find it funny how it's using the technically unofficial official Tooth Domino's Neek head, which was introduced in Hidden Side, and I think that's a pretty good one because he basically is kind of the grandfather of all sorts of Ninjago mechs now as the designer of Cole's Titan mech, and I also really like how it has that neck bracket to make it look like the hat is falling off of his head. It's really well done. Love the sand green color scheme as well. It's a nice torso and leg piece, and it's just a really cool additional figure to get for Kai to rescue in this set. And with that, we have summed up my thoughts on Kai's Fire Knight Mech. This is a beautiful Ninjago set. It is maybe one of my favorite mechs of all time. I'm gonna have to go back and at some point go through a new list of the best mechs that LEGO has made, but this is probably in the top 5, I would say. It's definitely below Cole's Titan mech, it's maybe below Cole's mech from the Ninjago movie because that one was just so unique with a gigantic wheel instead of legs, but this is easily maybe number 3, and that is very high praise because I own every single mech LEGO has ever made. So having built them all, for this to be in my top 5 is very, very good. But that's just my thoughts. What do you think of the Fire Knight mech? Will you be picking it up when it releases on June 1st for the entire world except the US and August 1st for the US? Let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and be sure to like and subscribe for even more LEGO news, reviews, discussion, and analyses coming your way very soon. Bye for now.